Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly livestock market update. I am Brownfield anchor reporter Meghan Grubner. With us as always to talk all things markets is University of Missouri's Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Megan.
We have a couple of things to get into today. We're going to talk a little bit about trade data, which is always exciting to talk about. But I think the big news of the week came a little bit as a surprise to some of us. Some new reports from USDA's Ag Marketing Service, and we're going to get into those a little bit later as well. But to recap, or to get us started, let's recap what happened this week in the markets.
Yes, we saw some good news this week, Megan, on cattle markets. Live fed steers were up a little more than $2.50 this week. Those feeder cattle markets were mostly steady this week as we look across the different auctions that we had. On the future side, the October live cattle futures contract was up about 20 cents this week, and the September feeder cattle futures contract was up $1.25. On the beef side, some strength this week in beef prices again. Box beef prices up $16. Choice box beef up 16. Strong ribs and strong briskets, kind of led the way. We were up across the board in those components. On the hog side of the equation, cash barrel and gilts were down nearly $1 this week. The October lean hog futures contract was down 35 cents. We also saw strength in the pork cutout value this week, up $2.40. That was really led by strength across the board, with the exception of hams that were down slightly.
And actually, they were higher, significantly higher at midday today. So it'll be interesting to see how those finish out. I want to talk a little bit about these AMS new reports from USDA's Ag Marketing Service. Cattle pricing reports aimed at helping to improve transparency. And it's a conversation we've been having for a while. I talked to National Cattlemen's Beef Association yesterday, and we chatted a little bit about them. And while this is good news, this is obviously not the end all be all for that. Talk to me a little bit about what type of benefits these could potentially provide producers.
Yes, we have two new reports coming out. The first one's a daily report, the National Daily Direct Formula-Based Cattle Report. So that's going to give us a chance to see the base prices for the reported formula prices, as well as what's being paid for premiums and discounts. So for me, I think that might be the report that begins to trace what's the base price for those alternative marketing arrangements relative to negotiated prices. Is there good correlation, not good correlation? The second one's a weekly report that's going to look at the distribution of prices. So I think there's always been this question about whether there are sweetheart deals between some feed yards and packers that would have much higher prices than what we might see reported in the average. So this is going to look at $2 increments and see the volumes in each of those. That we should be able to get that on a regional basis each week. So more information in terms of then what's that distribution look like? Is it one-sided? Is it not? I always go more information here in terms of cattle pricing is better relative to less. I'm interested to see the first report that we get next week.
What, Monday and Tuesday of next week, I think these kick off, correct?
Yeah, so one on Monday for sure, but early next week we'll have both. Well, yeah, have both of them early next week. That's true, Megan.
So do producers also need to know what, maybe some educational about what they're looking for producers who don't use these tools on a regular basis? How do they learn what to look for when they're trying to market cattle on their own, or they're trying to market their own cattle?
Yeah, you asked a very good question. I will say there's a lot of data already reported by AMS. This is going to be different, I guess, in terms of what's available, but there's a lot of information, and I sometimes worry about information overload and trying to be able to think about how these reports matter. I'm interested in what kind of history AMS might give us in these two reports longer term. I think we're not going to get a lot of history out of the gate, if I understand correctly. Maybe they'll fill that in over time. So then I can begin to say, I want to go back to, I don't know, I'll pick a year, 2014. What was the distribution of prices relative to the negotiated price we would have seen then? And then what's it like today? And has that distribution changed? I think there's some good comparisons to history that if we can get that history from AMS over time, that will be good. If we don't end up getting that history, I think it's maybe there's a little less value to what these reports might bring to us.
All right, let's talk slaughter numbers as we take a look at this week. How did things end up?
Yeah, so if we look at cattle slaughter for the week ending August 7, 641,000 head. That's down 8,000 head from where we were a week ago. Actually up 8,000 head from where we were a year ago. On the hog side, a run of 2.327 million head. That's 15,000 above a week ago, yet 232,000 below where we were a year ago at this time.
Definitely interesting to watch to see how those are starting to line up and drop off from where we were a year ago. When we look at those hog numbers, what are some of your takeaways as we see those numbers drop back a little bit in comparison to year ago levels?
Yeah, so I want to keep reminding us that fewer supplies have been important to what have been higher hog prices this year. Demand has been strong, but let's not forget that we're sitting here year to date with about 76.3 million head of hogs being slaughtered, down 1.1% relative to a year ago. If you just go back, Megan, this is the first time really since 2014 or so that we've seen numbers turn down. We've been in this growth phase for a number of years, and the turning down, I think, equally has been important to the price run up that we've seen in hogs this year relative to the demand strength that we've seen.
Especially, I think about it as we started to see the cash hog prices kind of pull back from the peak that we had been in recent weeks.
Yeah, that's right. I think there's still this, what do supplies do going forward? The last hogs and pigs report was awful friendly, even going forward for a period of time here. I think there's maybe a little bit of growing concern about slaughter capacity late in the year, but I believe some probably feel like we're starting to talk about adding pigs, at least from a pig crop standpoint. And let's not forget, pigs per litter has been down pretty hard in the most recent data that we would have seen out of hogs and pigs report. So perhaps we're catching up on pigs per litter, and that will show up in the next hogs and pigs report for us.
Big report this week, monthly trade data. As we look at that, beef and pork exports had another strong month.
Yeah, I think the train has clearly left the station when you look at what we've done in export markets this year. And certainly June's continued to be pretty strong data. If you look at beef exports for June of 2021, 267 million pounds. That's 84 million pounds above where we were a year ago. Now, I want to be a little careful there, right? 2020 was still choked down in terms of exports just because of the slowdown of processing capacity then. But across the board, we were up on the beef side, Megan. China leads the way, up 38.5 million pounds. South Korea up 16.7. We've got, again, strength across the board. And just as we've talked about in the past, there's a lot of other markets, although still small, that are growing that I think are important to what we have going on. And again, just to make sure we talk about where we sit here, beef exports up more than 20% relative to a year ago, year to date. And you look at even relative to 2019, 12% higher than where we were year to date relative to 2019. On the pork side, same thing of stronger exports. 564 million pounds of pork was exported in June of 2021, up nearly 50 million pounds relative to 2020. Here, a little different story, right? So, as we've been talking about, China's been down. So, exports to China, Hong Kong, Taiwan down about 88 million pounds relative to 2020, June of 2020. Yet, we were up in total as strength to South Korea, Japan, Mexico really shows up here as being up nearly 58 million pounds. And then all those other markets, all those other small markets, up 40 million pounds relative to June of a year ago. And when you look at year to date versus 2020, we are at 1%, which, given what's been happening in the China side, to me still is a fairly strong number. And again, up nearly 30% relative to 2019 year to date.
I think about when I look at these numbers, we talked about the opportunity that China presented for beef, and it is doing everything that I think anybody had hoped it would do, and in some cases, maybe even a little more.
Yes, for sure. And I think now the point to be made, just like happened on the pork side, so it comes in spurts, I will say, when you think about China trade. And so we don't want to lax or lull to sleep that exports of beef to China is going to grow every year. I think there's some potential for continued growth, but at the same time, repeating that year after year after year probably gets harder to do as we look ahead.
Jobs report out today. Let's talk a little bit about those numbers as we continue to monitor the economic situation here at home and what that ultimately means to domestic demand.
Yeah, so we got another strong, or I shouldn't say another, but a stronger jobs report in July after what was the June being not as good as we hoped. 943,000 jobs added in July. That's well above the expectations that we saw pre-report. When you look at the unemployment rate, it fell to 5.4%. That's a 0.5% less than where we were in June. So really strong job number. So it's good to see that kind of strength. Now, I think markets are trying to figure out how to interpret that strong jobs number, because the concern might be that kind of strength could lead the Fed to tightening monetary policy as we look ahead, raising interest rates. And so it's interesting to watch both sides of that discussion unfold in terms of what this really means. But hey, we had 943,000 jobs. I think demand for beef and pork will certainly continue to be strong here.
And chicken wings as we head into football season.
That's that's correct. Nothing like a good chicken wing to add to the mix.
Just kidding. We had been talking about the chicken wing shortage earlier this week, and I have to watch what's going on with the availability of chicken wings, especially in this household. All right, as we wrap up today, we're going to talk a little bit about land values. That report also came out this week. As we take a look at that, are you surprised knowing kind of what's been going on in the market over the last few years overall?
So maybe a little bit, although you look back at what we did in 2020, and just to rewind ourselves to when COVID broke, I think it was all negative in terms of what the effects were going to be for agriculture. Yet when we finished 2020, we had very strong farm income growth as a result of really a lot of help on the stimulus side to offset some of the direct market effects of COVID-19. So we did see a 7% increase relative to 2020 in the overall U.S. farm real estate value. The one that jumped out to me was cropland values that were up roughly $320 relative to where they were in 2020. So up about 8%. That's the first time since 2013 we've seen that kind of annual growth. So we certainly got pushed back up in terms of U.S. cropland value. We'll see as we continue here through 2021. Higher prices on the crop side, I think, certainly will continue to put pressure upwards on land values going forward here.
It definitely will be interesting to watch how that continues to ebb and flow over the next few years, especially as we're watching what's going on market wise as well. And while prices are high now, that doesn't mean there's never any downside risk.
Absolutely, Megan. So to your point, all right. So we all don't know what we're going to put in the bin here come this fall, and I've seen people on both sides of USDA's current corn and soybean yield estimates in terms of higher or lower as we go through the rest of the year. But you put a big corn and soybean crop in the bin, I think that continues to put pressure on prices. See what happens in South America for their growing season. It doesn't take us long to be back in a story where it's not so positive. And so we don't know for sure where we head going forward, but we've certainly been through some pretty strong times, despite none of us would have maybe predicted that given all the COVID issues that we started with.
I don't think anybody would have put us where we are today a year and a half ago when all of this started.
It's certainly been a wild ride. I always keep saying I think the next generation of economists that come on the scene, I don't know, about 2030 or so, are going to look back and go, what the heck happened in 2020? Um, and it will live with us for a long time in terms of the kind of marked effects things like pandemics can have on ag markets.
Scott, it's always great to see you. As we look ahead to next week, I will be in Nashville for National Cattlemen's Beef Association annual meeting. It'll be interesting to hear those hallway discussions, especially on the heels of the AMS US or the USDA announcement from AMS, and to hear what those folks are saying about these reports. But that's not the only thing that's happening next week. What other reports will we have?
Yeah, so retail prices out next week as well as consumer sentiment. For me, the big one, USDA will give us WASDE next week, and I think this will be the first time that they'll go away from trend yields for corn and soybeans. So I'm curious to see what they're saying about the crop that we potentially put in the bin this fall.
Always great to see you. We will chat next Friday.
Sounds good, Megan. Have fun in Nashville.
I will do that. To have our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday morning, go to brownfieldagnews.com. You can also submit questions and comments there as well. And for podcasts, for all of the great Brownfield Ag podcasts, there I can get it all out. Go to brownfieldagnews.com/podcast. Have a great weekend. Hopefully I will see a lot of you next week in Nashville. I'm Meghan Grebner for Brownfield.